Please give a warm welcome to director Kesley Mann.
Hello. Is this mine?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Is this working? Hello. Thank you for coming. Hello, the families. This makes me so... Families in the theater. This makes me so happy.
And
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having me.
And I'm sitting here feeling very anxious. I don't think
Yes,
I'm
it's
worthy.
okay. Oh, no. Did you wear orange on purpose here today?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's okay.
My favorite character, anxiety.
Tell her to go have a seat, sip a little anxiety. Everything will be okay.
I was super geeky question right off the bat. Yeah. I love the fact, this is my third time watching it, the expansion of the ratio of the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me, where did that come from?
Oh, man, no one's asked me that. That's a really good question. It was actually one of the first decisions I had to make on the movie, because when I first started, I work in the, when I came to Pixar, I work as a story artist. So I was a storyboard artist, so I was doing a lot of drawing. So I draw a lot whenever I think and be creative. And so I need to draw in, on my Cintiq. And they're like, well, what aspect ratio do you want? I'm like, oh, wow, I don't even know what the movie's about. And I have to decide, like, what aspect ratio. I did know at the time that Riley, I was exploring her as a teenager.
So to explain that the aspect ratio, it means that it was wider, it was bigger, the screen. You saw that, lengthwise, it was just bigger. That's what we're talking about.
The first film was 185. It's a little bit not as wide as what you just saw. And so I thought I could just do what the first film did. But then I was like, wait, what's the story telling me? All my decisions as a director should come from the story. So I'm like, okay, she's a teenager and her world's expanding and she's dealing with more complex things. So I thought, why don't I expand the aspect ratio too? And I knew too that there's gonna be new emotions. And from the first film, the console, if you remember at the end of the first film, they expanded it. So it kind of went, horizontal. So I thought, okay, it might be better to actually fit all the emotions in a longer kind of frame. So that was honestly the first decision I made on the film.
That's awesome. I mean, you brought up the console at the end of the last one. We have Joy, the button that says puberty, and then she has that iconic line questioning what could happen.
That's right.
Was that always the idea that the sequel was going to be dealing with puberty?
No, like in the beginning, Pete Docter, who directed the first film and was the chief creative officer at the studio, he brought me in and asked if I'd be interested in thinking of an idea of what we could do to tell another story in this world. But he didn't have an idea, but he thought I'd be a good person to go off and think of ideas. He actually wanted me to pitch 3 ideas of what we could do. And so I knew one of them would be Riley as a teenager. Because one of the first things I did is I rewatched the first film with Pete Docter, and it's all right there at the end. You got that. It was all meant to be a joke, to be honest. It feels like it was set up for this, but it's so hard to make one movie at Pixar, let alone think you're going to make more than one. And so that was really put in there just as a joke. That last line, it was kind of to show, Joy is kind of this bubbly, optimistic character, and they thought it would be funny if she didn't learn really anything from the first film, that she's like, what could happen? Like, it's all good. So it's just meant to be a joke at the end of the movie. But I remember seeing the first film, and I was working at the studio at the time we made the first movie, but I was on another movie. So I got to see the movie from your perspective, which I think was a great perspective for doing the sequel, because I could go, what do I want to have happen from your perspective of being in the audience? And I wrote down a couple things. I'm like, I want that puberty alarm to go off. Like I would have felt a little like cheated if I didn't get that. So I knew one of the pitches I would do would be Riley as a teenager, and that's what we ended up going towards.
I have to ask you right off the bat about anxiety, my spirit animal. Anxiety is one of the most fascinating characters. Tell us about, building the character. It could have been a villain,
Yeah.
but it's far more nuanced and complex than being a villain.
You're right, and she kind of started that way. I always thought she would be the antagonist in the film, which I thought was an interesting thing that made it different from the first movie. There's really Joy's the antagonist in the first movie. She just doesn't know it, But I thought it'd be really interesting if in this movie, like the first film, they were accidentally thrown out of headquarters. I'm like, oh, what if they were purposely sent away? Like somebody was taking over. I was influenced by
All About Eve.
Yeah. All About Eve, one of my favorite movies. And
she's very Eve Harrington.
Yes, there's a lot in there. Eve's a little more manipulative in terms of she knows what she's doing. That's where it switched a little bit. Anxiety kind of started that way, where she was kind of coming in and taking over Joy's kind of role, and she was too antagonistic. She was kind of a cardboard villain, and we didn't like watching her. At the studio, we make the movie over and over and over again. We do it we write the script, and then we storyboard it, and which means we draw it frame by frame, and we watch it as drawings up on the screen. And so we do that every 3 months. So we're constantly looking at the movie. And there was a version in which she was an antagonist, and it just didn't feel fun to watch. It also didn't feel true to the way our anxiety actually behaves. We had a lot of experts on the film to help us get this right. And I remember meeting with Lisa D'Amour is a wonderful clinical psychologist. She has written a lot of books that I read immediately when I started on this movie. And we asked her, why do we have anxiety? What's, all of our emotions are in there, in us for a purpose, to help us. And she's really there. Our anxiety is there to help protect us and keep us safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it could
when
be
we
also
switched
a motivator as well.
Yeah, it's a great motivator. It's, the difference I tried to put in the film too. Fear is the feeling you get of a known threat. Like you see a tiger and you're like, there's a tiger, I see it. It's right there. That's fear. Anxiety is the fear of the unknown, a perceived threat. Yeah. Bush shakes and you're like, I think that might be a tiger. And anxiety is like, it's best to assume that that's a tiger because then we'll stay alive. And so then you spend your whole life worrying about tigers everywhere, But it's really coming from a place of protection and from a place of love. And so when we switched it so that anxiety loves Riley just as much as Joy does, she's just going about it in a harmful way. That's when things really started to work with the film. I always said they're two parents arguing over how to best take care of their child, but they're both doing it from a place of love.
Mm-hmm. Cinematically, I greatly admire the choices that you guys made vis-a-vis lighting and also camera work regarding anxiety. For example, at the beginning of the film, we don't see any orange until anxiety appears. And then, the camera starts, when we're in the real world and anxiety has control, the camera starts getting handheld and a little shaky and stuff. Tell us about subliminally incorporating that aspect of anxiety in the visual.
Yeah, we have, you're 100% right. That's exactly, Jason Deemer, my production designer, would be so happy that you don't want people to be so aware of it that they're pulling you out of the story, but hopefully you're feeling it, And so he did make it a rule that, I don't want to have any orange in the film up until anxiety really shows up. There might be a little bit here and there. I think there's some on her sweater, the rainbow sweater that she has and stuff. But and then everybody's what I love about working at the studio is everyone thinks the way you're talking about right now. The story has to drive all the decisions, down to the color, down to the camera, like how are we shooting things. So there's a lot of that kind of put into the film, and it hits an apex too. And we want to look. We do a color script in the movie. It's really cool where you'll do little key moments in the beginning, middle, all the way to the end. And we really wanted it to be full orange. When she's in her panic attack at the end of the movie, we really wanted orange to be incredibly present in that particular scene. Filling the wall with the memories of orange really helped, like, light that place up. And then especially when she's spinning around, there's a lot of kind of orange that's in that moment.
The scene where Riley is in the timeout cubicle, what is it called?
Panic attack.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking the penalty box.
The penalty
Yeah.
box. The way you guys shot it is such an emotional and powerful. I mean, I noticed the low angle, and then there's also, I could see the depth of field, what's happening in the background. You know, can you tell us about animating? It's such a beautiful sequence.
Yeah, it's some of my favorite shots in the entire movie. It's kind of ironic because they're horrible shots because I'm worried about Riley, but I think what they're doing so well is they're emotionally affecting, at least myself and for audiences. It's what I love about that moment. There's so many people that it takes to make these movies. This is like, I mean, you saw the credits. There's like 500 people. And so many people all collectively working together to make that image happen, between lighting and layout and animation and sim. You know, that's like doing hair and cloth and stuff. Everybody working together towards the same thing. And if you watch, the more she gets, like, as her anxiety is building, the depth of field is really going out, and the lights and the lighting starts to blow out. It's colder, you know, you can kind of feel that. And then, I love it, like when she starts to take a breath, you know, and she starts to come out of it. And she's also, it's a technique you can use, like, of just using your senses. So, like, there's a shot of her putting her hand on the bench in the penalty box. Mm-hmm. That's using touch, and she's using sound, and she's using the feeling of the sun hitting her face to try to get her in the present, because anxiety is so much about what could happen, what's around the corner, what's tomorrow, you know, and it's a way to ground yourself. And as she's doing that, they're slowly coming out of it with the depth of field and with the lighting. It's some of my favorite shots. I remember seeing some of those shots and I just blown away. Like, I know that when the movie is working really well, is I work with such a big team of people, and eventually it gets to a point where I'm watching it and I feel like I'm not a part of it. I feel like it's existing on its own, and I'm just in it, and I'm suddenly in. All I'm trying to do is get into your guys' perspective, where I'm an audience member watching something happen to somebody. And I was so worried for her, and I couldn't believe what they were able to achieve. I'm like, this isn't. I remember turning to them, I'm like, you guys are amazing. Like,
I was so emotional watching it because of the artistry. It's an incredible. I don't think I recall a moment in a Pixar movie that was so beautifully rendered, that penalty box sequence.
And I'll be honest too. Like, you're always making this movie over again, and you're hoping that it's better and better, and you're trying to make a great film, and you're always kind of hoping that it is, and you're thinking, like, I think it is, and we show it to each other at the studio, and you're like, I think it's good. Do you think it's good? And then I remember being on the scoring stage. Andrea Datzman, she did the score. And I remember it's really cool at the scoring stage because they have it up on the screen just like this, but there's no sound. So all the orchestra is in there. So they have a visual, so they can kind of look at what they're doing, but they can't hear it. And I remember standing out, listening to her score in that particular part, and staring up at the big screen. And it's, the movie works really well if it also works with the sound off, you know?
Of course.
It's just visual. And I remember just looking up, and I felt such empathy and worry for Riley. I wanted her to be safe and protected, and that's when I thought, like, I think I'm really proud of what we've done here, and so proud of everybody that made it happen.
How hard was it to animate Anxiety's hair? I mean, her hair changes with what's happening.
Yeah, she's a little bit like a dog with her tail. Like, you can feel the emotion through her tail. Like, did you notice she has like little crinkly hair whenever she gets really like anxious? You have to plan that way ahead of time, that you're going to be doing that. So that's a lot of talented people that end up making the hair, and then also making the hair actually be able to animate and change on top of it. And we even debated having like bolts of lightning kind of go through the hair. But then we thought, you don't want to do too much because sometimes it can get overwhelming, and you have too many things going on at the same time. I think we stripped that out because we thought it was a little too much. Mm-hmm. Her eyes are doing something too, right there at the end when she hits her apex.
And how did you guys figure out she's just one big mouth and two eyes?
That took a long time. She was probably the hardest character to design, and Deanna Margalise, she came up with that final design. It was a much more kind of like we were talking about earlier, her being the villain. She kind of had like a more kind of an evil look to her, not this kind of fun take that we have. She, fear and anxiety, they're kind of, I would say they're distant cousins to one another. So Deanna really leaned into that. The eyes. Think about fear. Fear has kind of the same big eyes. And so you can kind of see that they are a little bit related to one another. And we also, it was really important to us too that we push the design for anxiety and have a little bit of fun with it because she's not all bad. And she can be, like, when she came on, I wanted to be excited when she came back on screen. Like, oh, there's anxiety again, and you want to be able to relate to her, but also you want her to be entertaining. So she kind of leaned into that kind of fun of the design. The other thing we really like too with that is if you look at the 5 emotions from the first film, in terms of their design, the male characters, fear and anger, they're kind of the ones that are the most pushed in terms of their design. Do you know what I mean? Like, anger is just like a block. We're like, why can't the female characters have the same kind of push design? And so Jason Deemer really wanted to do that, and Deanna leaned into that, and just kind of like, I mean, she's a really fun design. It's really with the wide mouth was great for the teeth. The kind of like nervousness, kind of teeth to it, and the hair really helped. Show her emotion.
I'm obsessed with her. It's speaking of being obsessed with anxiety, the projection lab, right? Tell us how the genesis of that and who came up with the idea of having those playing cards being the dividers for the cubicles.
Isn't that a great idea? That was 100% the art department. It was more like a cubicle. So backing up, where did that come from? My job as a director, when you tell a story, any movie, but especially one about emotions, is you have to look at what you go through. And I've learned to be incredibly vulnerable to make a movie like this, saying things that not a lot of people are okay saying with, And this all came from my head hitting the pillow at night. And my mind just starts to go. You know what I mean? When you have a presentation, something big the next day, you're all fine that day until you go to bed. And then when your head hits the pillow, that's when I feel like anxiety is like, all right, let's get to work. What could go wrong? Did you remember this? Do you have this? And again, there's a good side to anxiety. Get ready for your presentation that you have tomorrow. But it can go too far. It can be like, did you remember this? Make sure you do that. Get up early. Is my alarm? I flew down here today. I'm like, is your alarm set? Is it on? You sure it's on? What if it's not on?
You're preaching to the choir here. I mean, do I have enough questions to ask him?
Yes.
Are my questions good enough? I mean, I stayed up all night, obsessing about all of this shit.
Yes, it's a lot. It's overwhelming. So I'm like, I want to put that in the movie. And there's a research to it. When your mind, because we're busy during the day, and then when you're at night, all you have is just your thoughts. I love the fact that you use anamorphic and the 25 millimeter for those projections. Oh yeah. That whole area was so much fun to design. It wasn't initially cubicles. It was just kind of like an office. We're not taking advantage of the fun of the mind world. And there's the art department where they were like, here, because it was always in imagination land. I remember Meg LaFauve, she wrote on the first film. And I've had 2 writers on the film, Meg and Dave Holstein. And Meg was saying it'd be really great to take the power of imagination and use it against Riley. I'm like, I feel like that's what I do. You can be very creative in what could go wrong, right? And so we thought it would be in Imagination Land. And then the art department was like, well, let's use some of Imagination Land's stuff. And so they came up with the idea of using the playing cards and the fort. They came up with Fort Pillotin, you know. They came up with having it in a fort, which I thought was so fun.
Yeah.
Because it's taking something that was used to be fun and playful and inventive and using it for something that's going to eventually hurt Riley.
Super geeky question. Why is it that you minimize the queens and the jacks in the when you create the cubicles?
Did we what? We minimize them?
Yeah, we barely see queens and jacks with the
I
cards.
don't think there's anything conscious there. The only thing I made conscious is that there's a Riley card that's in there, you know? And so I wanted to make sure that it's staged near Joy and the Emotions, because that's who they're really caring about and worrying about.
Yeah, this is the sort of detail that I was looking at. It's like, I don't see any queens and jacks. And I thought that there was some, you know, tell us about sarcasm, which is...
Isn't that really great? That
incredibly delicious. Yes, how did you guys come about?
Ideas come from different places. Like the projections area came from me, like say, you know what that, when you go to bed tonight and your head hits the pillow, sometimes it comes from something emotional. Sometimes it just comes from a joke. And so somebody had pitched the sarcasm as a place. I'm like, that's hilarious. Oh my gosh, we have to put that in the movie. And then you have to figure out a way, story-wise, why to put it in. And it worked out really well because the sarcasm worked really well for the for what Riley's going through and becoming a teenager. We had some wonderful lands that just didn't feel right because it didn't fit the story. One of my favorite lands that we ever came up with that I wish we could use at some point is Procrastination Land. What I loved about Procrastination Land is that it had a big chain link fence and it said Procrastination Land coming soon. And it was nothing but a dirt lot. And there's a couple workers sitting there as the emotions were running through. And they're like, you think we should start building this land today? Let's do it tomorrow. Let's do it tomorrow. It was a really fun land. And there was also some other really fun stuff that I don't want to spoil because I think it's such a fun idea. But it didn't add to the story. We had trouble because anxiety is driving up in headquarters. So it was really hard to have anxiety driving Riley and having Procrastination Land. And it kind of slowed the movie down, too. Like, they literally started to slow down through this land. And so we ended up cutting it. But I think it's such a fun land. But sarcasm was so much fun. That was one of my favorite days of recording. Is I would tell, like, Amy Poehler, okay, say the line earnestly, and now say it sarcastically. And I always found I had to dial them up a little bit. I'm like, no more sarcastic. Come on, say it like you're saying it to your brother. And then that usually was the direction that got them to go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. It's really fun.
One of my favorite actresses is Adele. I can't pronounce her last name. Exarchopoulos, who does the voice for Ennui, the wet noodle on the couch.
Oui.
And she tells a story in one of the interviews that I read that you brought photos of you from your birthday parties.
Oh, yeah.
And you showed it to her. Can you tell that story?
You're going to the heart of the film. That was in my pitch at the very beginning. So what he's talking about is I decided at one point I needed to scan all of my photos, my physical photos. I just wanted a digital copy of them. And as I was doing that, I came across one that was my birthday when I was 5 years old. And I'm sitting in front of this cake. I have all my family and friends around me, and I have the biggest smile on my face. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, wow, I'm really happy. And the key to that photo is it's not just some random day. It's my birthday. And it's a day to celebrate me and who I am. And I could tell by that smile on my face, I was 100% in on doing that. And then as I went forward, I had this big smile on 5, and then I turned 8, and then I turned 11, and then I turned 13. And I was like, wow, look at what happened. Here I am at 5, and I have the biggest smile on my face, and I'm 13. I'm just sitting there staring at the cake. And I had to, it was my job. I had to go deep and like, what was I feeling? What was going through my head? I hated being sung happy birthday to at that age. I still kind of do, but I'm a little bit better at it. And I go, well, why? Why was I feeling that? And if I really go deep, deep down, I was thinking, am I really worth all this celebrating? At this age, you become incredibly self-conscious. And I hated everyone staring at me. I hated the attention. I didn't want anybody to look at me. So I really felt like, am I really worth it? And that's why I wanted to make this movie. And that's why I pitched this movie. It's an incredible world to play in, the Inside Out world, because you can do a lot of good in this world with it. And you can talk about things that need to be talked about, things that people feel that are afraid to say it. And what I think is so powerful for this movie is that at this age, you're always thinking, you know, am I the only one thinking and feeling what I'm feeling and thinking? And I have the power to put something up on the screen and say, no, you're not alone. You're not the only one who thinks and feel that. And it's okay. It's okay to be messy and imperfect. And that's why I made this movie. So that's really the heart of the film.
No, thank you. Lucky for us. And it's your first film.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. That was, thank you. I never thought, I mean, talk about, it's weird where your life can take you. I never thought I'd be sitting here in front of you all, you know, having directed a movie at Pixar. I never thought I'd ever get this chance. It took me a long time to get into Pixar. After I graduated college, I applied to Pixar, and they rejected me. I had to work down, I moved to LA, and I really worked on my stuff. I worked at different studios, smaller to bigger. I took night classes, and I just tried to get better and better. And then I eventually, 10 years, it took me to apply again. And I ended up getting not a rejection letter, but an acceptance letter. And so I was so happy just to be a story artist at the studio. And then I really think the experience that I had, those 10 years working in the industry, helped gain me some leadership skills. And so I ended up getting offered to be a story supervisor pretty quickly at the studio, faster than I ever thought, because I never thought it would ever happen. And then to be asked by Pete to direct a movie, I never would have thought this would have been the case.
And how was your anxiety level
during
this whole process?
You know, it's funny. It's funny that I'm like, oh my gosh, I put on screen what I was feeling. I only know it now, kind of like looking back at it. But I'm like, I really felt a mixture of utter joy and deep anxiety doing the movie. It was a battle between my joy and anxiety. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly the movie I made. Like I put it up on screen. That's what I was feeling at the time. And but I really tried very early on. You know, the aspect ratio was one of my first decisions. My second decision from the very beginning was, how do I want to show up to work? Outside my story room, it's a big empty room. It's kind of a scary, like a blank canvas is always the scariest thing to any artist and any writer. And outside there's a little plaque that you can put like, this is Kesley Mann's story room, so everyone knows what room that is. And there's a little pit, you could put a picture in there. I'm like, what am I gonna put in there? And so I decided to put, I thought about what do I wanna feel every day when I walk in? I'm like, I wanna feel joy. I don't want to feel like there's a lot of pressure, you know, making any movie at Pixar, let alone a follow-up to a film that everyone loves. And so I'm like, if I feel that pressure as I walk in every day, I'm not going to have a chance. But if I come in with a sense of joy, then I could have a chance. So I put a little picture of me when I was like 8 years old, and with a big smile on my face, because I thought, if I could go back and tell that kid that he's going to get this chance, he'd feel nothing but joy and excitement. And that's what I needed to feel when I walked through the door.
You're going to make me cry.
I knew that kid could have a chance in making something good. So I chose joy in that moment.
Thank you. And broke box office records, and it's one of the best Pixar movies. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so happy with how well it's done. The part that, you know, obviously I want it to do well in the world, and I want, for lots of reasons, for Pixar, for movies, for theaters, I wanted it to be really successful. But the part that makes me the most happy is that is the impact it's had on the world. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said thank you. Yeah. And all over the world, like it's done really well here, but it's done really well, like in so many different places in the world. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, that anxiety is kind of everywhere, but it is. I think there's something very universal about this, and I really wanted to make sure. I said it as I walked in. This makes me so happy to see families in here. I've got 2 kids, and it's very seldom that I can say, do you guys all want to go to the theaters on Saturday and see X movie? And we all want to go. I feel like there's so many things that are geared towards certain people, like, you know what I mean? Like it's all targeted. Yeah. And I feel so fortunate we're able to make something for everyone. You know, Rise a teenager in the film, but so I wanted teenagers now to relate to it. I wanted younger kids to be able to understand it. And I wanted adults I wanted everybody in the family to get something out of the film. So I tried to make this for everybody. That's the part that has really kind of hit me, is the impact that this has had.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah. Sweaty palms from anxiety.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, take care. Thank you.